Hey guys, Marstingan here, bringing you another Dragon Ball Z Dokkan battle video. And so the release of the GT edition of the Legendary Goku event is soon to be upon us. And I did ask you guys over on the community tab on the YouTube channel if you wanted me to make a team building guide. Now obviously with the event coming out so soon and the fact that I have work today, there was no way I was going to be able to make and push out multiple different videos for the different missions. So we're doing them all in one video here. I will put timestamps down below in the comments, so if there's a particular mission, a particular team build that you want to jump to, you will be able to do so. But I do ask, I put a lot of time and effort into making all of these. This video is probably going to be over an hour long by the looks of it. So if you can do your boy a favor and watch the whole thing, even if you don't need help on some of the teams, because that will help me out with my analytics. It doesn't look super good if you put out an hour video and people only watch like 10 minutes of it. So I would very much appreciate it if you guys help me out by watching the full video, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you are new. But let us go ahead and jump into the first team build. So let us start off with representatives of Universe 7, because this is the big one that have got people talking, because the difference between JP and Global is obviously very severe. What with JP having the 6th anniversary that was entirely Tournament of Power themed, and Global has not yet had the anniversary. So there are a lot of awakenings, LRs, new TURs that are going to be really good for this team for JP that we don't have access to on Global. So I'm going to cover the units that are available on both, and then we'll talk about the other ones a little bit later. I'm going to throw in the honorable mentions for the actual 6th unit LRs, but we'll talk about all the other extra cards that JP has a little bit towards the end. So one of the leaders that of course Global can use, we do have the Goku and Frieza. We don't have their Easy A yet, but they do have the highest leader skill, 3 key and 177 to stats. Now pre-Easy A, their defense is not amazingly good, so I feel like if you're going to use them in one of these long form difficult events, you probably want to use them for their leader skill and then have them as a 3rd slot floating unit. As crazy as that sounds, but just because their defense is not going to be super good, and once you get to like the final stage, they are going to get a beat down. Now obviously in the original Legendary Goku event, the final stage was Int, which made it a lot worse. If the Int stage in this event is a lot earlier on, then we might be okay, and especially if the final stage is AGL, then these guys would actually be very useful. And obviously on JP, if you have them fully Easy Aid, they are way more powerful. They raise defense on their super attacks. They're obviously going to hit a lot harder. They're just much better overall on JP, but they are still a viable leader on Global. Then of course we have STR Kaioken Goku, the living meme himself. Shout out to Sora, but he does have the 170 lead for attack and defense, 130 HP. This is going to be one of those interesting ones, because in the early stages of a long form event where it's not super difficult, you obviously want to try and get him to attack as many times as possible so that he can get his passive fully built up. And then his defense isn't that bad. It's not great, but it's not that bad. And he is going to be doing some pretty decent damage. And then of course, if you drop below 59% HP on any point, there's no turn restriction, because we're running a full reps of Universe 17, you can use the Spirit Bomb, which does a crazy amount of damage and then raises everybody's attack. So, I mean, we've seen also videos back from the original LGE that using his Spirit Bomb and then the following super attacks, you could one-turn the final stage of the original Legendary Goku event. So it's very possible that you might be able to do that with this as well. You just have to be careful with him and taking hits, because if this event is going to be as difficult as Extreme Super Battle Road, as it says in the news post, then he could definitely get slapped around a little bit. So then obviously for JP, we have the AGL Ultra Instinct Goku and the Int Blue Evolution Vegeta. Both of them have reps of Universe 7 as one of their leader skills. Obviously, if you're on JP, you're going to be using these guys if you have them. I don't really need to go into a huge amount of detail about what they do. They're both insanely powerful. They have the revival skill. Like, they're just incredibly good. So it kind of goes without saying that if you have them, you're going to be using them. I mean, it's just that simple. But obviously on Global, we do not have access to them. Remember, of course, that the final stage, I think it has been confirmed now, disables dodge. So AGL UI Goku is not going to be able to dodge in the final stage. But his defense is going to be pretty decent at that point. If the final stage is tech, maybe that would be a little bit of a headache, but he's still going to be very, very powerful all throughout the event. So then, of course, we have STR UI Goku. So now we know that dodge is disabled in the last turn. He still is pretty good, because as long as you can get all of those dodges in at the beginning of the turn, he is going to build up his stats very nicely. You need to dodge 7 times before you get to the end and dodge is disabled, but then his stats will be relatively decent. You will probably still need to be careful when you get to the final stage. You probably don't want to be putting him in front of like 6 attacks, especially if one of them is going to end up being a super attack. But he's still very good. He has the 70% chance to dodge, and then once you get to past 7 turns, it drops down to 50%, which is still pretty good. And like I said, as long as you can dodge those 7 attacks before his passive runs out, he is going to have very solid stats overall. Then we have the Physical Angel Frieza. He's perfect for long form events because you can choose to transform him straight away, but pre-transformation he infinitely stacks defense. He seals, which I don't think you can do in this event, but the infinite stacking of defense is obviously going to be very, very useful. He has a bonus attack and defense buff as well as a chance to dodge after he takes the first hit of the turn. So if he's taking multiple attacks, it's very possible that he just dodges the ones after the first one, and if he doesn't, he's going to take slightly less damage because he is getting a bit of a defensive buff after he takes that first hit. So your best bet is to just keep him building up as you go through the event, and then once you hit a nice high defense number, you can go ahead and transform into Golden Frieza, and then you massively raise attack on Super. Very solid stats. Obviously we can't stun in the event, but if you do also happen to drop below 49% HP, he has 50% damage reduction as well. So he's just going to be super, super good for this event. I think if you do have him, he did return on the GT Vegeta banner. If you do have him, he's probably a must-use on this team for this event, just because, as we know, in long-form events, units that can infinitely stack defense are always going to be super useful. So then I thought we would talk about this AGL Krillin. He does have a Reps of Universe 7 sub-lead as well, so I guess if you don't have Goku and Frieza or the Kaioken Goku and you're on global, you could use this guy as a leader. Now, I would only use this guy when paired alongside the 18, because he has 180% attack and defense and a medium chance to dodge, which obviously we know will expire in the final stage. But then he gets 2 ki and an additional 120% attack and defense, which is pretty crazy, as long as you have an 18 in the same turn. So the only real good 18 to use is this one, because she is a nuking style unit. She creates her own tech orbs from physical, and then she gets 12% attack and 7% defense per key sphere obtained. Now the problem with her, just like other nuking units, if you get stuck in a turn where you can only pick up like 2 orbs, her base attack and defense is only 70%, which means her defense is only going to be like 84%. So she will probably get smacked around. She does raise defense by 30% for 6 turns, so it can stack multiple times. So if she gets an additional super, her defense will be fairly decent. But again, if you don't pick up many orbs, it's not going to be super great. And of course, the other problem is they don't have very good links together, which is kind of awkward. Obviously they do both have Tournament of Power, which is fine, but they don't share a ton of good attack links. Obviously Krillin is slightly like self-sufficient with ki when there's the 18, and 18 is creating her own orbs, so it shouldn't be a huge issue. But I probably wouldn't run the Krillin unless you are running the 18. But I do think there are more powerful options, but if you need to fill a slot for your rotations, they can work. Then we have the LR Blue Boys. Obviously, they are solid. They greatly raise attack and defense on their super attacks. So they obviously, if you pick up multiple rainbow orbs, they can do multiple additional normal attacks, which increases the chances of them getting the additional super from their hidden potential system, because even at 55%, they are physical, so they have 3 level 5 additional. So if you can get that second super attack off, they are greatly raising their defense again. So they'll be very, very strong defensively. And then once you get later on into the event, I think it would be a good time to use it. There's no turn restriction though, but whenever HP is 50% or less, you can use their active skill one time to give give them guaranteed 24 key, 70% extra attack, and then minus 50% defense. So you need to be careful. This is the perfect thing to use on a turn where you can put them in a slot where they don't have to take any hits, because then they get full 24 key, so you don't need to worry about the orbs you're picking up other than trying to go for rainbow orbs, because ideally you do want to get all those extra attacks on the turn where they're using their active skill. And then on that turn, they're going to be able to dish out an insane amount of damage. So then we have the physical MVP 17. He's always worth a mention on these teams. He provides key and defensive support to everybody. His own defense is okay, but obviously if you drop below 77% HP, which is quite easy to do, he then does also get 40% damage reduction. So he's, you know, I'd be much more comfortable with him taking hits when that is active. But if you are above 77% HP at the start of the turn, you should be careful about where you put him in terms of taking hits. But he's going to be very good for supporting the team, especially if you are bringing a bunch of the different LRs because of that key support. And then last but not least, I decided to include the AGL Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta, who transforms up to evolution. He does build up his defense over time. He can be fairly good. The problem with him has always been if he transforms really early, he doesn't, like, you stop stacking that defense, because he gets 7% defense with each attack performed up to 70%. So he needs to attack 10 times, ideally, before transforming, and then you get him at his full potential. And then once transformed, he has fairly solid attack and defense at the start of the turn, gets the 2 additional attacks, has a built-in chance to crit that can go up to 70%. So he has the potential with dupes and like orbs and stuff to super attack twice and normal attack twice. That could all be crits. Now overall he has aged a little bit, so his defense isn't the best. If the last phase is tech, I could imagine him taking a bit of a beating, but he's definitely going to be a useful option for filling the final slot. So looking back at the team, obviously we have the Reps of Universe 7 LR on JP, we have the Roshi, we have the Frieza and 17. All of them are really solid options. We have the Awakening for the physical UI Goku, who's really good support unit, and with the same name update being on JP, you can run him regardless of whether you're running like the SCR LR or the Int Dokkan Fest one, who of course has his EZA on JP. I think on global he's probably not worth using without his EZA. And then of course there's the TURs, the Goku, Gohan and Piccolo, and Gohan and Frieza. Both of them will be fairly solid on the team as well. So basically for JP, if you got lucky during the anniversary and you have like all the anniversary units, your team is going to look completely different to a global player's team. But obviously with the anniversary being Tournament of Power themed, it's kind of not really a surprise. But let me know what you guys think down below. If you're on JP, are you able to rock all the new anniversary units? If you're on global, what is your team going to look like? Let us know down below in the comment section. Okay, so Battle of Wits. Now this is another one that on global only has the one official leader, which is the LR, Goku and Vegeta from the Worldwide Celebration. If you didn't pull them, there are going to be a couple of other ways you could potentially make the team, but we'll go through some of the top picks and honorable mentions right now. So obviously Goku and Vegeta, ridiculously good, built-in damage mitigation. After they super attack, they raise their defense. They can potentially additional super even at 55% because of the built-in medium chance in their passive. So they are just ridiculously good. The only thing to bear in mind, of course, once you fuse, when your HP is below 77% from the 4th turn, you can fuse into Super Vegito, which does give you a nice heal. So that's something you can kind of keep in your back pocket, get that extra 50% HP back. Very, very useful. But then, of course, remember that he loses the built-in damage reduction. So his overall defense is slightly higher, and he still raises defense on super attack, but he doesn't have that damage mitigation anymore. So if he takes a super attack, he's definitely going to take quite a bit of damage. But of course, he can counter normal attacks. He is going to take a little bit of damage from the normal attacks as well, depending on just how hard hitting this event is, because remember the description says it's as hard as Extreme Super Battle Road, and on the Extreme Super Battle Road category stages at 55% when you transform this guy into Vegito, he's still getting hit for like 30 odd K potentially, so you definitely need to be careful of that. But of course remember as well, fusing does give you the chance to foresee enemy super attacks for 10 turns, so you can plan out your turns a little bit more strategically. So Obviously, he is the main choice for a lead. Then we have the Tech LR Vegito. So I think I need to double check all of the units, but you can probably make a final trump card / Potara team with this guy of all units that are on Battle of Wits. But regardless, you would probably want to be bringing this guy on the team as well. A lot of people are quick to judge the 5-year fusions and say that like they've aged badly, but they're really good, remember, in long form events, as long as you can get them built up, because in Super Battle Road, ideally you want to be putting them in slot 3 and getting that 50% chance to dodge. But in this longer form event, in the early stages, when they're going to be able to be on rotation without potentially taking too much damage, you are going to be able to get them built up nice and early on, and then once they transform into Vegito Blue, then of course, you know, crazy additional attacks, tons of damage. You have access to the active skill, which can be used from the next turn after transforming, as long as the enemy is 50% HP or below. So you can potentially save this for one of the later stages. If one of the last couple of stages is AGL, then that's going to be the perfect opportunity to let fly with this active skill. And I was just having a quick double check, but there are a lot of units that are in final trump card that are in Battle of Wits, so this guy definitely is a good stand-in leader. Then we have this Int Vegito from the 3-year. Their leader skill is obviously Potara, so that is a lot more restrictive because it does obviously include all of the Vegito units, but after that it starts to run a little bit shy, so I'm not sure if you can make a full named team of all the different Vegitos. I think you can just about, so that's another option. Potara is definitely doable as well. In long form events, you're going to be able to see these guys transform into Vegito, which is going to be good, really good for getting that free extra heal once you drop below 50% HP from the 6th turn onwards. And then once you actually fuse into the Int LR Vegito, like, he is still insanely powerful even today. The STR Vegito probably does output more damage, but this guy does still put out damage as well with the counters and all that sort of stuff. Plus, he does raise allies attack by 30% on his 18 key super, so if you have him in slot 1, then he's going to be buffing everybody else for the rest of the turn. And he gets 3 extra key for rainbow orbs, so it's very easy to get his 18 key super, so he's still very, very good. Then we have the STR Vegito Blue, so I thought I'd include him. You know, physical Vegito Blue kind of rules the roost when it comes to options for Vegito Blues, but remember, in a long form event, this guy is super good because as long as you keep getting his 12 key super in the early stages, he does infinitely stack his defense. Whereas, let's say the final stage of this event is going to be STR. If Vegito Blue takes a super attack, he's going to take a ton of damage, the physical one. Whereas this guy, he's going to be built up and he's going to tank really, really well. So he's a good option. Plus, he is technically free to play, so he's a good option for a lot of players. Then we have the Pycon. Now, obviously, we're going to mention him again when it comes to the Connected Hope missions, but he is on Battle of Wits, and technically you can use him as kind of like a support unit for the teams that he's on, right? Because as long as you're picking up the 3 type orbs, he's giving allies 2 key and 30% attack and defense, and then as long as you pick up a rainbow orb with him, he has the high chance to dodge. He can lower attack, he can also seal, but obviously we're not sure exactly on whether those mechanics are going to be usable in the stages in this, because in the original LGE, I don't think you can seal or stun like straight away from the first phase. So those are potentially not going to be useful abilities. But on Battle of Wits, we've already mentioned we have 2 different versions of Goku Angel that we've already talked about. So you are going to be able to get his unit super attack on this team as well. So Pycon definitely can be useful as a support unit. At 55%, I feel like in the later stages, especially if Goku can disable dodge, he might start taking quite a bit of damage, but he definitely is a useful option if you did pull him. Then we have the Krillin. So Krillin is a very solid unit only as long as you run him alongside an Android 18. and then he is really, really good. He's got like 300% attack and defense. And there is one good Android 18 on this category, which is the tech one. She is a nuking style unit, which unfortunately the only problem with nuking units is if you get stuck on a turn where you can't pick up a lot of orbs, then she potentially is going to take a lot of damage. So ideally you would want to have Krillin as the main tank and then put her where the lesser attacks are of those two slots, because you do need to run them together in order for the Krillin to be good. But there definitely is an option if you're lacking on some of the other more powerful Vegetos. That is definitely a viable rotation. Then we have our boy Candy Vegito. Shout out to Jay Fanta. After his Easy A, he is definitely much better than he was before, because he infinitely stacks attack and defense now. He does have the 70% chance to dodge. And then, you know, if Goku does disable dodge by the end of the event, like the LGE we have now, you know, he's going to be very highly built up by then. And he does get attack and defense 20% per tech key sphere, or just defense 10% per non-tech key sphere. So even if you get stuck in a situation where you can pick up a ton of orbs but they're not tech, at least he is raising his defense off of those, and then he's still stacking off of his super attack. So he's going to be very useful, and he is a free-to-play option. Then we have the Tech Trunks. Tech Trunks was a god in the original Legendary Goku event, because once you transform up to Super Saiyan, you infinitely stack attack and defense, and he builds up very, very quickly. So you're easily going to get to the end of the event with this guy taking like double-digit damage from supers. And then when you get into that final phase and you start to wear down the final Goku's HP, then you can go for the transformation into the Spirit Sword and deal like one massive finishing blow type attack, because it's definitely not a good idea to transform him too early on, because he does lose a lot of his defensive capability when you do that. But you can use the active skill for this final transformation to deliver a final blow, which is going to be very powerful. Then of course we have Physical Vegito Blue. We've already talked about him. I guess we don't really need to go into him too much. Everybody knows what he does. He is one of the gods of easy ATURs. As long as he multiple super attacks, he's going to be tanking normal attacks for very little damage. Super attacks will still hurt him, especially if there's type disadvantage thrown into the mix. But yeah, he has the potential, as long as the RNG is on your side, to put out quite a lot of damage, as well as be pretty good defensively. And then we have a good link partner for him, and just an all-round solid unit if you did summon on the Heroes banner, is the Super Saiyan 4 Vegito. He raises defense on Super, so he can tank reasonably well. He buffs crossover or giant 8 power allies, which I don't think we've really covered any units that fit into that, but that does at least give himself a little bit of an extra buff. And then he does have the 50% chance to counter super attacks as well, which is very useful. And like, even though they're both physical, so you're running a double phys rotation, which could be dangerous if there's an STR phase, but he's a super good link partner for Physical Vegito Blue as well. So then we have the Physical Piccolo. He's a very useful unit to have on the team. He does foresee enemy super attacks, which is a super useful mechanic. He recovers a little bit of HP when your HP is 77% or less, and he does infinitely stack defense before you transform. Obviously, if you're not bringing another Namekian on the team, which is unlikely considering the list of Battle of Wits units, you're never going to transform him. But in this state, he's foreseeing super attacks and infinitely stacking defense, so that's going to be very, very useful. If possible to get him to transform, he does have damage reduction, built-in chance to crit, so he is going to be very powerful. But I'm fairly sure if we flick back here, I don't think there are any other Namekians. Yeah, so you're not going to be seeing him transform, unfortunately. But in his untransformed state, he infinitely stacks and he foresees super attacks, so he can be very useful for that. And then finally, as an honourable mention, we have the Physical Android 17. He buffs everybody on the rotation's defense. When he is below 77% HP, he does have damage reduction as well, which is quite nice, and he does provide a bit of key support as well, so it's going to help out, especially if you have those rotations of multiple LRs. So those are some of the top picks and honourable mentions. If we go back and have a look here, I don't think we really missed anyone out. The AGL Prime Battle Trunks and the Int Vegeta are probably not going to be great for this event until they get an Easy A. Same with the Piccolo. Trunks and Mai, we're not going to be fighting a future type enemy, so they don't have, they're not going to be able to get their dodge chance, so it's going to be a little bit awkward for them. The LR Krillin potentially could be okay, but not a lot of great link partners on this team. And then Physical Trunks is kind of in the same boat as the Prime Battles, where he really does need an Easy A. Super Saiyan 3 Trunks can be pretty good defensively. He has a chance to guard and he raises defense on super attack, so he could be kind of useful. We didn't talk about AGL Super Vegito, but obviously he is going to tank normal attacks for basically no damage. But he's a little bit outdated now in terms of damage that he puts out, especially if you're not critting on counters, and super attacks will absolutely destroy him as well. But out of that, I don't think there's anyone else. I mean, Tech Vegito Blue, I would say the physical and the STR one are better options, but he does stack as well. So by the end of the event, he can hit fairly reasonable defense levels. In fact, an honorable mention has to go out to the Int Toa. She provides support to all allies. And then, of course, if you drop below 50% HP, she is going to give you a 50% heal. She then buffs also extreme allies for that turn, which this team is probably not going to be built up consistently of many extreme type allies. But if nothing else, the free heal is going to be nice. So I would say she's probably worthwhile for that if you did summon on the Heroes banner. This Trunks is really, really good, but the team build that we covered, we don't really have many Hybrid Saiyans, which he is a support unit for. But even if you don't have a lot of Hybrid Saiyans on the team, he is a very solid unit overall. Sealess is kind of okay, but very outdated, especially in terms of defense. So I think that's pretty much it. This Trunks can be an okay support unit, but he's outdated in terms of defense as well. Plus, you do need to have at least one other Vegeta family unit. So if you are bringing this Tech Trunks, the physical Trunks could be a good support. So that is Battle of Wits, the honorable mentions and top picks. Let me know what your team build will be for this one down below in the comment section. Alright, so next category up is Power Absorption. So again, this is the Bootanks category. So if you were lucky during the worldwide celebration, you are going to be able to run the Bootanks lead. At least the AGL Boo Piccolo is a sub lead for this, and he went into the general pool once the Part 2 banner came out for that celebration. So you may have the AGL Boo Piccolo if you don't have the Bootanks. Obviously, Bootanks is the best lead for this overall. This is kind of a tricky one when it comes to sub-leaders, but let's go over some of the units here. So obviously the Bootanks is the best bet. He's the best choice for a friend lead as well, of course, if you are going to run like the Boo Piccolo as the sub lead. He raises defense infinitely on his 18 key super, so early on in the event you probably want to get his 18 key super as much as possible, and then if you're lucky you get additionals into the 12 key, which then infinitely stacks his attack as well. And then once you get to the 4th turn or onwards, as long as your HP is 50% or more, you can transform into Buhan. This is one of the easiest transformation restrictions that these powerful units have, so you're always going to be able to see this. But your best bet with a long form event is obviously to go on for as long as you can without transforming him. Just stack up that defense to an insane level, then transform. And obviously once he transforms into Buhan, he stops infinitely stacking. He just raises attack for 1 turn on super. So sometimes if once you start to build up your defense to a decent level, you might want to deliberately go for 12 key supers before transforming him, so you can get that infinite attack stack a little bit as well. And then if you do that and you manage to balance between those 2 super attacks building up through the first few stages of the event, once he transforms, he's going to be hitting ridiculous attack stats as well as having really, really good defense. So not much we really need to say about this guy. He is a beast and obviously best leader for the team. Then the Boo Piccolo, he's the best sub-lead. He's also one of the best units to just bring on the team after you've put the Bootanks in place, if you do have him. He recovers HP at the start of the turn, which is always useful. And then Key 3, attack and defense 150. So he's self-sufficient in terms of Key. Pretty decent stats. He has a medium chance to dodge built in, and then he gives all power absorption category allies attack 30% and defense 50%. So very, very strong support unit. I think we know now that the final stage does disable dodge. So you got to be careful in the final stage with this guy. But he's going to have reasonably good stats. So he should be okay as a very solid support unit for this team. So next up, we have the Int LR Cell. He's very underrated, I think, nowadays. Like a lot of people class him as the worst Dokkan Fest LR. Maybe that's true, I don't know. But he can be very useful in these kind of events because of the free heal. So obviously, if you drop below 30% HP, he'll transform into Perfect Cell, and then you get the full heal. He is a very strong unit. The more HP you have, the more defense he has. And then, of course, this part of his last part of his passive is not really geared for solo enemy events. Gets 1 key and 20% attack per existing enemy. But once he transforms, he does very decent damage. He lowers attack and defense, which probably can't lower attack too far into the event if it's like the previous LGE. But he fully recovers your HP. Then he becomes self-sufficient, 4 key, 120 to stats. He gets an extra 20% attack and defense if you pick up 4 or more orbs. If you get 6 or more, he gets another extra 20%. And if you can get 8, he gets another 20% extra attack as well. And then, of course, he does have the Solar Kamehameha active skill when facing only one enemy and the 3rd turn after transforming. So depending on how early in the event you can transform, obviously depends how early you'll get to see this, but it's just a classic good old damage dealing active skill. So you can fire this off, get a bunch of extra damage for free. Sometimes it can come in really useful, these kind of abilities, like if you're going into the turn and you know you're going to get the Dokkan attack, but the enemy's almost dead, you can fire off the active skill to kill them, move into the next phase with a big full fresh enemy health bar, and then fire off your Dokkan attack. So he can be pretty good. The only problem is he's not going to link very well with the other units on the team unless you are bringing other cell units, because outside of having like Fierce Battle, Big Bad Bosses, and then potentially Legendary Power, with like the Bootanks / Buhan, he's not going to have the best link set, but he can be useful. Then of course we have the boy himself, Super 17, our MVP. Really good. Obviously once he gets built up, he's got very solid attack and defense as well as damage reduction. He also gives target Goku allies chance to perform a crit 17%, which is kind of an interesting one, but it works perfectly alongside his best partner for this event, which will be the Android 13, because Android 13, very good in the original Legendary Goku event, because he's basically designed for the Goku event pretty much. So a new version of the Goku event, he's going to be really good. So pre-transformation, he supports Android, so he's going to give Super 17 a little bit of an extra buff. His attacks are guaranteed to crit. So we know that the Goku can disable dodge. We don't know if he can dodge. But once we get to the 5th turn, as long as we have 2 or more Android allies on the team. So if you have Super 17, you do need to bring one other Android. So either the Cell, Android 21 is on power absorption and is obviously an Android. Then he can transform into Fusion Android 13 or Super Android 13. And once he becomes Super Android 13, he guaranteed crits when facing Goku enemy. So obviously in this event he's going to be very good. Attacks are guaranteed to hit and he disables guard, so it doesn't matter if the enemy is tech, he's still going to do solid damage, and his defense is going to be very good as well. He also gets a little bit of a buff depending on the number of target Goku allies on the team, so it just makes the combination of him and Super 17 really good, and that rotation is going to be very strong even against tech enemies. So then we have the tech buff Boo. Obviously he works best alongside one of the other Boos, but he raises attack and defense bar up to 100% depending on the more HP you have. He reduces damage received by 20% when HP is 80% or more. So obviously nice little bit of damage reduction as long as you don't drop below 80% HP. And he recovers 5% HP at the end of the turn if he takes a hit. Now, on a normal sort of Boo-centric team, his best link partner is one of the Kid Boos, but the Kid Boos are not on power absorption. So this guy can still work alongside the other Margin units because they do still share a bunch of decent links, but they're not as good a link partners as he is with other units other than the Kid Boo. But he can still be a very useful option. It's one of the great things about a lot of these EZA units is they're older units that have been in the general pool for a while, and so a lot of people are likely to have this guy over some of the Dokkan Fest units. So then we have the Int Buhan. Obviously, he's a lot older now. Even with his EZA, he is a little bit outdated. I think he probably earns a spot here on this section as more of an honourable mention, as like a link partner for the LR Bootanks, because as the event starts to get a lot harder, and especially if there's a physical stage, he is going to take a lot of damage, especially if you can't lower attack once you get to that point. But he can recover quite a large amount of healing with the orbs that he picks up. and if he does deliver the final blow on one of the phases, you get a bunch of HP back as well. He is a nuking style unit, so if you can get one of those crazy turns where you can actually pick up a lot of orbs, he can still be very strong. But the reverse is also true, and if you get unlucky with the orb placement, his defense is not going to be very high, and then he's obviously going to take quite a lot of damage. So then we also have the STR Super Boo, the unit everybody loves to hate, but honestly I have him at level 10 links, and as long as he transforms into the Buhan, so when your HP is between 80% and 100 when it gets to turn 5, then he is the perfect link partner for the LR. The Boo Piccolo transformation is pretty decent, and that's HP 49% or below. If you get unlucky and you get the Go Tanks fusion into absorption into Boo Tanks at between 50% and 79%, that is probably the worst one and becomes very awkward. He has over in a flash, which no one else on the team really has. He seals, which I imagine we can't do. And so that's not going to be super good for this one. The Boo Piccolo does at least greatly raise defense for one turn on super, and he does provide key and defensive buff to everybody. And then of course the STR Buhan greatly raises attack and defense for one turn, recovers 10% HP at the start of the turn, and then just has solid attack and defense 120. So him linked up with the LR Buhan is very, very effective. Then we have Omega Shenron. I threw him in here just because he's on the category. Unfortunately, even with his easy A, without being able to lower the enemy's attack in the later stages, that a lot of his usefulness is kind of cancelled out, because as you can see, he does only have attack and defense 80% in his passive. He does give full power category allies key +2 and attack 40%, so if there is any crossover with the units that you're bringing that are on full power, although I don't think any of the ones we've mentioned so far actually are, but he can provide some support to them. He's probably more of a, if you desperately need a unit to fill the 6th slot and don't have any other options, kind of fill-in unit. So then we have the physical Fat Boo. He got very good after his easy A as well. He does need to receive 3 attacks to get his full passive to activate, but then he has pretty solid defense, and he does recover 30% HP whenever HP is 40% or less. So because that can happen multiple times, that can be a pretty good like heal in a case of emergency. And obviously all of these Boo units, they either heal up via links or at start of turn or all of that. So you're going to have a lot of very powerful healing on the team if you bring a bunch of these Boo units. And then the last one I thought I would mention is the physical Super Boo, the 50% support for extreme physical. Obviously if you're running the LR Boo tanks, especially if you're running double ones, if you're running yours and a friend, then this guy floating is going to be buffing them on both rotations and enabling them to hit even crazier numbers. So if we look back to power absorption, the LR Prime Battle Cell is okay. I guess you could bring him if you are bringing the Int Cell, because they would link fairly well together, although obviously the Tech Cell doesn't have Fierce Battle. Going down the list, the Skinny Boo, I think we've talked about him in one of the other categories, because I'm not recording these all in the right order, but his passive runs out after 8 turns, so in a long form event he's not as good. We did mention Android 21. Obviously if you are bringing 13, you do need to have another Android outside of just Super 17 so that he can transform. She's okay. Like obviously Android 21 is my queen, the ultimate waifu, best Dragon Ball waifu, don't at me. But unfortunately, until she gets an easy A, her defense is a little bit lacking. She does lower attack when she attacks, which in the early stages could be useful, and she does heal on super. If she transforms, she then heals at the start of the turn, gets a little bit of an extra buff, and she does disable guards, so if the enemy's AGL, she can still do pretty reasonable damage. But overall, she's not that great. She's kind of useful as a 3rd slot floater on this team, just for the little bit of extra healing and to fulfill the conditions so that you can get 13 to transform. But other than that, I would say probably not like a must run on the team. The Tech Fat Boo is okay as well, but you can't lower attack, which is one of his main uses. He's really good in Super Battle Road for that. Mira, I guess, could be okay, because you have to use him in a long form event anyway, because you can't transform until the 4th turn when HP is 60% or less. But I tried this out when he first got his awakening on global, and because this team heals so much because of all the boos, it can actually be difficult to drop below 60% HP. But if you can get him there and you can get him to transform, he is pretty solid. He can launch additional super attacks, he infinitely stacks attack, As long as you're running a full extreme team, he gets a bunch of extra attack as well. And then, of course, extra attack and defense per ally on the team. The extra attack he gets is if allies are on the same turn at all extreme. So obviously on a full extreme team, he's getting his full passive active. So especially because mine is rainbow, he would be okay. But again, I feel like he's only a 6th slot filler if you need like that one extra unit. So that is power absorption. This one definitely going to be a little bit more difficult. In terms of sub leads, the STR Super Boo obviously has transformation boost, which all of the Boo units are in. So you could run him as a lead, run all of the Boo units, and then run the LR Boo Tank's friend. Obviously, the Tech Exchange Boo has Margin Power as a leader skill as well, so you could use him and then run the full Margin Boo team. He also has Artificial Life Forms as his other leader skill, so you can bring some cells and units like that as well. So it is possible to run a full power absorption team without the Boo Tanks. It just is a little bit more awkward. So let me know what your team build for this one is going to look like down below in the comment section. Okay, so next up we have Connected Hopes, which is of course PyCon's category. So PyCon is the only leader for this category currently on both Global and JP. There is no sub leader, so if you don't have PyCon, you are going to have to try and build a team on a different sort of blueprint, but we will cover some options for that as we go through some of the units here. So obviously PyCon is the leader. He is going to be pretty decent in this event. He's a lot better than Janemba, at least, because you only have to get the 1 Rainbow Orb and 3 Type Orbs in order to fully get his passive. So depending on the team build and how you want to run your rotations, you can always use him as an off-rotation unit, and as long as you're getting that 1 Rainbow Orb and 3 Type Orbs, he's going to support the rest of the team, and then the 1 Rainbow Orb, of course, gives him the chance to dodge, so he's not going to be like a liability in the 3rd slot who's taking a ton of damage. Even if you can just get the 3 Type Orbs, at least that way he is operating as a support unit. And of course, on his team, there are Angel Gokus or Vegetas available, so you will be able to get his partner super. So greatly raises attack, does immense damage, and gets attacks effective against all types, which is the most important part of his partner super. The attack's effective against all types, so that's obviously going to help you out throughout all the different phases, especially if you are fighting against a tech enemy. And then of course he does have the active skill when you're fighting only one enemy. As long as your HP is 50% or more starting from the 4th turn, you basically have a free Ghost Usher. So this can actually come in super handy later on, especially if you just save it up for like the last phase. And as soon as you get into the last phase, the first turn that you have with PyCon, I'm sure he's going to attack a whole bunch of times, just like int UI, and then you can pop PyCon's active skill and he's not attacking you at all. And of course, if you do have PyCon and you're running this team by using double PyCon leads, you have the other PyCon as well, so you could use his active skill. I'm not sure if, I think it functions like a Ghost Usher where you wouldn't be able to use them turn like back to back, but I'm not actually 100% sure on that, because if you can do that, you could basically just lock down the last fight for the first 2 turns, which would be pretty crazy. So, but yeah, moving on, we have the AGL Spirit Bomb Goku, and then we have the STR Namek Goku. I could have put these either way around. The reason why I've included these guys is they're both good units on the team anyway. STR Namek Goku, obviously when he transforms up to the Super Saiyan form, he does infinitely stack defense from this point onwards, so obviously in a long form event he's going to be really good. And then of course you do have access to the Rage mode, which you can use a little bit further into the event. I would save it for if there's a physical stage, because it's not a crazy powerful thing, but you just get a couple of turns of free damage, and you could quite easily use this transformation to completely destroy like a physical phase, especially if it's fairly early on. And then of course the Spirit Bomb Goku, sometimes depending on like which phase you're in and how hard the Goku is hitting, especially if you're on a tech phase, sometimes it's good to deliberately go for the 12 key super, because he does greatly raise his defense. But in the early stages, if you can lower attack, His 18 key super obviously does more damage, lowers attack and defense, and seals, which if it's like the other events you probably won't be able to do early on. But he does change orbs to rainbow, which is always useful, gets a bunch of extra ki from rainbow orbs, and does have that nuking style passive, so it is very possible to get a huge buff with him. And then the more Super Saiyan allies you bring, the more attack he gets as well. So the reason I highlight these two, I did actually make a tweet earlier today. I'm not going to show many fully built example teams in this video, but if you go to my Twitter, at @TheMaskedIngen, I have tweeted a couple of alternative team ideas, and you can build a full Super Saiyans team, either using this Goku, or obviously both. If you want to use this Goku because he has the higher leader skill, you can make a full Super Saiyans team that are all connected hope. So it is possible to build a team for this mission if you don't have Pycon. And then as like a last resort kind of stand-in, there is the 1000-day Spirit Bomb Goku. Obviously, if you haven't reached 2000 days yet to easy A him, his leader skill is only 100% and free ki. He definitely is a last resort. Like, if you get towards the end of the event, you really need to keep him hidden from attacks because he will take a lot of damage. Post easy A, if you do happen to have him, at least his leader skill is slightly better. And his defense is a lot better as well, but he's still not going to be crazy tanky, and you know, his leader skill post EZA is still only 120%. So moving on to some of the other units, we have the Super Saiyan 2 Angel Vegeta LR, very good. Obviously he does raise his defense on super attack, which makes him a lot more tanky as long as he's in slot 2 or 3. And then he does have a unit super attack when there is a Majin Buu Saga ally Goku, which if we go back to the Connected Hopes category, I don't think there are many that I would recommend bringing. Like, technically this Super Saiyan 3 Goku is, but I wouldn't recommend him. This Int Goku is actually, and we do cover him later on. Once he transforms, he does become a Super Saiyan 3, so his main key link becomes over in a flash, but they don't share a ton of key links anyway. And then there is this free-to-play Goku, but I probably wouldn't recommend using him either. So, even if you don't get the partner super, he can still be really good. Obviously, you can't use the active skill if there's no Majin Buu Saga Goku either, but he can still be a solid placeholder for the team without a Goku, but I would recommend bringing one if you want to get the full potential out of this guy. So, then we have the Physical LR Gogeta, the Angel Goku and Vegeta. Of course, they activate Pycon's partner super. Long form events are where you are going to get the chance to see these guys transform, because past turn 6, if you drop below 50% HP, they're going to fuse into Gogeta and give you a full heal. They will definitely still take a lot of damage if you get supered towards the end of the event, but if you can get them to transform, you do not only get the free heal, but attacks effective against all types, nice big attack and defensive buff, and he gets a ton of extra ki from rainbow orbs, so you are going to be able to get his 24 ki super fairly easily, as long as you don't have a very unlucky orb field layout. So he's going to be very solid for this event as well. Then we have the Int Gotenks. I feel like people underestimate this guy a lot because he's good for Super Battle Road because of his Super Saiyan transformation having the 70% chance to stun, which we likely can't do in this event. But remember that in both his first turn and his Super Saiyan form, he does greatly raise defense on Super. So after super attacking, his defense is actually really good. And then whilst you're in the Super Saiyan form, he does have the high chance of getting a bunch of additional attack and defense. So if all of those proc, his defense is going to be nice and high. And then he does also have the built-in chance to launch an additional super. So his defense has the potential to be incredibly high after he is done with his attacks. And then, of course, in a long form event, once you're 4 turns past the Super Saiyan transformation, you do then have the ability to transform into Super Saiyan 3 as long as you're above 70% HP. And once he transforms into Super Saiyan 3, he is very powerful. I remember using like the new version of the Fusion team once this guy and in Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta were out on the Legendary Goku event. And this guy works really well because it takes him a long time to get to Super Saiyan 3, but then he is a bit of a powerhouse, and of course he greatly raises attack and defense for 3 turns on super, so if he double supers, again, he raises his defense even more, and he does have a 70% chance of launching an additional for 4 turns once he's transformed up to Super Saiyan 3. So if you have dupes in him, he can potentially super attack 3 times in those first 4 turns, and his defense is going to be ridiculous whilst also doing very good damage. So then we have this Int Goku that I mentioned. Obviously, he's going to be super good if you are bringing that Vegeta to proc all of his abilities. But this Goku is very good, just like the Tech Vegeta. As long as you're picking up the 3 orbs for him to get the extra 30% attack and defense, he tanks really, really well after attacking. And then, of course, when there's only one enemy, HP is 80% or more starting from the 3rd turn, which in these long form events is fairly easy, because obviously defeating one of the stages of Goku and then you're going on to the next one. If you have this guy on rotation, then you're going to transform into Super Saiyan 3. As long as you can pick up 3 orbs, he has a 33% chance to dodge, and if you pick up 6, he has attacks effective against all types, which obviously is going to help out in those later stages, especially if you're coming up against like a physical stage. So he does change to Super Saiyan 3, so of course his links change. He will work out quite nicely if you are bringing the Gotenks as well, and you end up getting him up to Super Saiyan 3, because then the rotation of them together would be incredibly powerful, because they're not only going to have those key links, but they're also going to share like limit breaking form, like the actual Super Saiyan 3 links, so they will link up super well. Then we have the Int Future Gohan. He is on the Super Saiyans category as well, although on this particular team, you're not very likely to be able to transform him, because you need to have a Trunks who is not the Kid Trunks or GT Trunks, and I think the only one on Connected Hopes is the full power Trunks is, which, I mean, the Int one from the World Tournament rewards is okay, but none of them are really particularly good for long form events. But I mean, he does greatly raise defense to 1 turn. He does reduce damage by 58% when HP is 58% or less. So as long as he's in slot 2 or 3, his defense will be pretty decent after he supers. But unless you already have that damage reduction active, he potentially will take a fair bit of damage towards the end of the event, especially from super attacks. So I would say he's probably more of a last resort, like filling the last slot on the team kind of unit. Regardless of whether you're running the Pycon lead or a Super Saiyan's team, because even if you can't actually transform him, he is on the Super Saiyan category. Then we have the Int Gogeta. Obviously post EZA, he's very good now. Hits incredibly hard. As long as you get 1 Rainbow Orb, you have the chance to dodge, which was definitely clutch for the Fusion Extreme Super Battle Road No Items run. And then if you are able to pick up 2 or more key spheres, he gets a bunch of extra attack. Sorry, 2 or more rainbow orbs. And then if you get 3 or more, he has a high chance of performing a crit, which works really well with his kit, because Gogetas have always benefited from having a lot of additional. So pre-EZA, if you gave this guy a lot of additional, now you're in a position where as long as you could pick up 3 or more rainbow orbs, which is slightly difficult, especially without a rainbow orb changer around, but you are going to get a whole bunch of extra attack and a high chance to crit. And then obviously if you get lucky with the RNG, you get the additional super. So he's going to be able to put out a ton of damage, as well as being slightly better defensively, because he's got more defense in his passive now post EZA, and he has that chance to dodge. And then lastly, we have the Physical Future Gohan. Now, he's a unit that was very underrated when he first came out, and he kind of dropped off like everyone's radar not long after having been released. But in long form events, he is pretty good. He gets 10% damage reduction at the start of every turn, up to 50%. So obviously, as you get through the longer event, he's going to have that 50% damage reduction. He raises defense on super attack, and the less HP you have, the more defense he gets. So if you start a turn and you're on quite low health further on into the event, he's going to have really high defense, especially after supering, as well as having 50% damage reduction. So he can be very useful as well, and of course he is on the Super Saiyan category, so he is another good unit for finishing off the team if you need that 6th spot to be filled. So going back to the list, I don't know if there's anyone else. Like, Oob is okay, but not super good for long form events. He does give you that free heal, but obviously later on, if you can't lower attack, he's definitely going to take a bit of a beating. Nail is only good if you have a Piccolo on the team, and the only Piccolo is like the free-to-play AGL one, who probably will not stand up in these kind of long-form events without getting absolutely destroyed. And then units that we might bring on other team builds for Connected Hopes, maybe for like Super Battle Road, like the Mize, are going to be pretty useless because we probably can't stun. So no one else here really stands out as an honourable mention. I guess if you're watching this and you're a JP player, Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks, the physical one, post EZA, is obviously very powerful, but we don't have that EZA on global yet, so probably why he didn't jump out off the page immediately. But if you are on JP, he would be a solid option as well. So let me know how you're going to build your Connected Hopes team. Do you have Pycon, or are you going to build the Super Saiyan team? Check out the tweet that I put out earlier. I'll probably put out a bunch more before and after this video goes up, just showing alternate teams. So let us know what your Connected Hopes mission team will be down below. Okay, so Corroded Body and Mind. So this is one that I think definitely is going to be tough for some people, especially if you didn't pull Janemba. If you did pull Janemba, then the category does offer quite a lot of very solid options. If you didn't, that's where you're going to start struggling, because as you can see, like just looking at the LRs and TURs, it's not a huge category. And if we have a quick look at the SSRs, yeah, there aren't any units here that don't have TUR Awakenings that would be useful. So as you can see, very, very restricted. So Janemba is your best bet for the leader if you did manage to pull him. He is the proper category lead with 170 across the board. He's an okay unit. I've been cursing his existence because of the Extreme Techno Items run having taken so long, because I think Super Battle Road really shows where this guy's weakness is. And if this new LGE event is going to be as hard as Extreme Super Battle Road, then the biggest problem with Janemba is pre-transformation. If you can't pick up the 2 Rainbow Orbs and 4 Type Orbs, then he does take a lot of damage, especially if yours is 55% like mine is. Now, his transformation condition in a long form event is not going to be difficult to get. Once he's received 5 attacks, then you can transform into Super Janemba. Then he actually picks up shocking speed and will link up well with the other Janemba units. Becomes a lot more powerful. As long as you can pick up the Rainbow Orb, he has a 50% chance to dodge. I think both the other Super Janembas are better defensively than him, but your main goal really is going to be to bring another Janemba to be his link partner, and then use the other Super Janemba as the main defensive unit, and probably put this guy in slot 2. So obviously he is your main choice for leader. If you don't have him, one option is going to be the STR Rose. Now, he only has a 120 leader skill, and you do have to make sure your team is one of each typing, like color wise, or his leader skill won't activate. But then, of course, you can bring a Janemba friend, and you're going to be getting still a pretty solid buff overall. He also does provide support to the rest of the team. The only downside, of course, is while we wait for this guy to get his Easy A, he's not the most solid unit, especially defensively. Like, if you look at his passive description, he has no defense other than the 50% buff that he's giving to all allies. So he's going to get hit very, very hard. You probably are going to want to use him as like a 3rd slot support unit if you are forced to use him as your leader. And then you're just going to have to make sure that if there are any turns where he's taking a bunch of attacks, those are going to be the turns where you have to use items to protect yourself. So then moving on, we have this Tech Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta, who transforms into Majin Vegeta. He's a really solid unit. I think he's super underrated. On ESBR, I used him on the Resurrected Warriors No Items run. After super attacking, as long as you pick up the 3 orbs that gives him the extra 30% attack and defense, he can tank really, really well. And then, of course, in these long form events, it's going to be fairly easy for you to start one of the new phases of the Goku with this guy on rotation, and then he's going to transform into Majin Vegeta. And as long as you can pick up the 6 orbs, he guards. So regardless of what typing Goku is in that particular phase, he's going to be able to tank really, really well as long as you can pick up those 6 orbs. The only problem with this guy I can see is that when he transforms into Majin Vegeta, he loses Prepared for Battle and picks up Over in a Flash. So if you haven't brought another Over in a Flash unit or a bunch of support units, you may struggle to get his super attack. But then remember, you are trying to get 6 orbs all the time anyway to be able to get his guarding. So you're always going to be gunning for 6 orbs, which would allow him to super even if he didn't have any key links activated. So then we have the STR Majin Vegeta. I included him because post Easy A, he is actually still really good. He greatly raises his attack and defense, so his defense can become very good. He changes AGL orbs to STR, and then of course he gets 20% attack and defense per key sphere obtained, regardless of which color. But obviously it does help out that he's creating his own STR orbs. And then of course he gets an extra 5% attack and defense per key sphere obtained when there is a Goku family category enemy. And of course, legendary Goku event, every single fight you are fighting a Goku enemy, so he is getting 25% attack and defense per key sphere obtained. So if you can get lucky with that orb changing, you pick up a bunch of orbs for him, and then actually he's really solid, especially after super attacking. His defense is going to be actually really high. So a rotation of him and the Tech Vegeta will work out very well together. Then we have the LR Metal Cooler Army. They're obviously a free-to-play option. Worst comes to worst, they do have an Extreme Types Leader skill, free key 70%. I mean, them coupled with a friend Janemba, that's going to be, what, 240% overall, which is, I guess, the same as running, like, double 120 leads. So it's a little bit tough now for harder content, but he is a free-to-play option as, like, a last resort enemy. On the actual proper team, though, if you are running, like, double 170 leads or a team that he can be run on, because one thing you can do is run the Vegeta as a leader and run a Resurrected Warriors team, because the Resurrected Warriors team will include the other Majin Vegeta, it will include this Metal Cooler, the AGL Metal Cooler, and then you have to fill the other 2 slots with the free-to-play Metal Cooler, like drones. But technically that is possible. But on a proper team under a proper leader skill, this guy's going to be pretty decent. The more HP remaining, obviously the more defense he has, and then he can launch a bunch of extra attacks. He has big bad bosses, so of course any unit that has big bad bosses, if you've link leveled them, obviously going to be much more effective nowadays, but he will be fairly solid. Then we have the LR Rose Goku Black. I always forget about this guy because he's one of the only LRs that I don't have, but as long as he's not in slot 1, he's going to be very good. He greatly raises defense on super attack regardless of which one of the supers that you get, and then of course depending on how much key you get, he's able to increase his attack even further. He does gain permanent key bonuses with each final blow that you deliver. So in this event, you know, there's multiple stages. If you can finish off a couple of the stages with this Rose, then obviously he's going to be getting a bunch of extra key. And then he recovers 6% HP at the end of the turn if he took an attack. And then he has the Rage mode, 66% or less HP starting from the 6th turn, which in a long form event is not going to be difficult to see. And then of course you get that one turn where you can just do a whole ton of damage for free, which is going to work out very nicely. Then we have our boy Marseille. Couldn't forget about this guy. He is going to be an actual GOAT in this event because after his EZA, he infinitely stacks attack and defense. So in long form events, those are the kind of units that you want to bring. So his defense is going to be insanely high by the time you get to the end. If it's like the original Legendary Goku event, you can only lower attack so far into the event, but the infinite stacking is what's going to be very good for him. And of course, when you're only facing one enemy, he gets his full passive. So he gets a little bit of extra key and then a whole bunch of extra attack and defense. So he's going to be very, very good on this team. I'm very glad that, of course, I have him Rainbow level 10 links. So he's going to be solid on this team. Then we have LR Super Baby 2. He is really good. I feel like he's an underrated unit. He doesn't have great link partners on the team, which I think is his only problem, but he is a really solid unit. Because you are fighting a pure Saiyan enemy, he gets that little bit of extra attack and extra key, and so he can hit reasonably hard. He's got okay defense, and then of course if you drop below 40% HP, you have a high chance of transforming into the Golden Grey Ape, so you can get a couple of turns of free damage. And he does get he gets 1 extra key per key. So I was going to say double key, but if you pick up an AGL orb, it'll be 3 key, not 4. So he gets 1 extra key per key sphere obtained. That obviously helps him to super attack, and if you can get lucky with the orbs, you can get the 24 key super with him and do some nice damage while not being able to take any damage yourself. So then we have the Int Goku Black. Now, before I hear those groans out there, yes, he is one of the worst Dokkan Fest exclusives, but in a long form event, you are going to be able to see him transform into the Rose form, and of course he greatly raises defense on super attack. He doesn't raise attack, and his attack overall is quite low, so by the time you get to the end of the event, his defense is going to be high enough that he's probably tanking super attacks for double digits, but his attack stat is going to be stupidly low, and he's not going to be doing a lot of damage, which is very unfortunate. But you know, for a lot of people, if you want to get these missions done, you have to go for the more defensive options, the strategic plays. So he's not going to be doing the biggest damage, but he's going to be very, very good at tanking. Then we have the AGL Rose. I included him, obviously, if you're not bringing the STR one, I would bring this guy over the STR. The STR one I only included as sort of like a backup leader, Whereas unfortunately this guy, his leader skill is only 4 key 80%, so you're probably not going to be using him as a lead. But he is definitely a good option for a 3rd slot floating unit. He greatly raises defense on super, so you don't have to worry about him getting hit before he attacks. And then of course he's providing extreme class allies 3 key and 30%. He then also gets defense increase with each attack he receives. So if you can get him to receive some attacks early on, maybe in like the early stages, like if one of the first 2 or 3 stages is STR and he comes onto rotation, it might be worth, even if you are planning to float him off towards the end of the event, you could put him in the 1st or 2nd slot where the most attacks are, so he can take a bunch of attacks from a weaker STR enemy and build up that passive, and then you can float him off into the 3rd spot and he's going to have very solid defense. So he'll be a very good option for support. Then of course we have the 2 Janembas, STR and Int. There's not a huge amount of difference between them. The STR one is better offensively more consistently because he doesn't have to be hit first in order to get his full attack bonus, but he doesn't have as much of a dodge chance as this guy. So I would say the Int one is slightly better defensively, and then I guess it depends. Actually, it doesn't even matter on the enemy typings because they all guard. So either way, either of these Janembas, if you've got them both easy aid, I think it would probably just come down to bring the one that you have the most dupes or that you've link leveled, because they are pretty interchangeable in terms of which one is better. And then finally, as a support unit, I included the Int Metal Cooler. After his easy A, he's pretty decent. Like, his defense is not amazing, but it's not terrible. And obviously, he's providing everybody with 30% attack, 3 key, and 40% defense. So everybody else on the rotation is going to tank better and hit slightly harder. So those are the sort of top picks and honourable mentions. If we look back at the list, like Margin Vegeta obviously has no defense. He really needs an easy A. This guy, not super impressive. I mean, if you have him linked up with another Goku Black unit, the only way he's really going to be super good is early on. You want him to get the finishing blows so that his passive is maxed out for later on in the event when it actually becomes difficult. AGL Metal Cooler we didn't really talk about. Lowering attack before he gets hit is one of the ways he's really effective in things like Super Battle Road. And obviously later on into the event, you're not going to be able to lower the Goku's attack, I assume. So he's going to take quite a lot of damage. The Baby Janemba is okay, he has built-in dodge chance. We don't yet know if the event is going to disable dodge. Unfortunately, the other versions of the Masked Saiyans, like the Black Masked Saiyan and the Dark Masked King, they kind of revolve around having a lot of other Dragon Ball Heroes units on the team, so you can't really use them on this particular build, which is irritating. I mean, you know, a lot of these other units now just super outdated, like Physical Goku Black. You are fighting a Goku family enemy, so he's going to be getting some extra buffs, but he's not super great defensively, so when you get near to the end, he's going to take a lot of damage. So, Corroded Body Mind, definitely going to be one of the harder ones, but I did include some ideas for other ways you can run the team if you don't have Janemba, so let me know down below if you're going to be able to run this one and what kind of team you are going to bring. Moving on to Space Traveling Warriors. Now, obviously, for JP, Bojack has returned on a banner. He came back on Vidal's banner, whereas on Global, he has not been back yet. So if you did not pull the Bojack, you are going to have to figure out another way to run the team. But there are a couple of options, and we're going to go through some of the units right now. So, obviously, Bojack is the main leader. He is very, very good, depending on how you want to run the team. If you're running double Bojacks, you can just run him as a 3rd slot supporting unit and then build the team however you want. Another solid option is to run him alongside the LR Bojack, and then obviously have him transform. And then after transforming, he becomes incredibly powerful, very high attack and defense, launches an additional attack that has a medium chance to become a super. And then if you can pick up 3 or 6 key spheres, he is getting a whole bunch of extra attack and defense as well. So he can be very, very powerful. So the way I normally run his team is to have one on rotation, whichever the best one is between mine and the friend, have him transform, and then keep the friend as a floating support unit. Now, if you didn't pull the Bojack, the Zangya did go into the general pool after his banner left. Strangely enough, I haven't actually ever pulled her, but she does have a 120 lead for Space Traveling Warriors. So you could like feasibly run her and then a Bojack friend, and then the team is not going to be terrible, because on a full Space Traveling Warriors team, she does have pretty decent stats. She has the ability to launch the additional attack as well, as long as you have a Bojack on the same turn. So if you're running her alongside the friend Bojack and potentially bringing like the LR and things like that, she could be pretty useful. She'll lower the enemy's defense because we won't be able to lower attack, at least later on into the event. Maybe in the earlier stages you can, so that would be useful. And she does also recover 10% HP at the start of the turn, so she can be quite useful for that as well. Obviously her links aren't great outside of linking her up with a Bojack unit, but she can definitely be a good substitute for leader if you have her but not the STR Bojack. So then we have the STR Cooler. Now the reason I put him up here so early is because it is actually very possible to make a Terrifying Conquerors or Transformation Boost team build that is all space traveling warriors. So people are a lot more likely to have Cooler. He's returned a few times now. We all talked about how great he was when he first came out. Even I said around the time that he was when he first returned on a banner, that he was one of the few non-LRs that I would consider worth buying with red coins. So at this point he's a lot more likely for people to have at least one copy of. And then he functions just like the Bojack, where you can have him floating in the third slot as a support unit if you want. But obviously when you're only facing one enemy, he only supports Transformation Boost, whereas I think Terrifying Conquerors is the one that has the most crossover with Space Traveling Warriors, but that team can definitely work very well. Cooler, obviously, just like Bojack, although, you know, Cooler came first, so Bojack much like Cooler, but Cooler, once he's transformed, obviously crazy stats, launches the additional attack that has a medium chance to become a super, and because we're going to be fighting Goku all the way through, he gets guaranteed crits, and of course he gets his access to his transformation early, which turn 3, because we are fighting a pure Saiyan enemy. So, I mean, even if you are bringing the actual Bojack leads team, Cooler is still a very solid option for that team. And then we have the Int Bojack. Obviously talked about him already briefly. He's going to work super well if you are running the Bojacks like team build. I think he's underrated. I think he's always been underrated. He's still a super good and very powerful LR, especially at like level 10 links, linked up with a Bojack. Like getting a Dokkan Fest Bojack gave him a new lease of life, because he does have some of these wonky links like Hera Clan and Galactic Warriors that when you actually have him linked up with somebody that has all of those, he's going to be getting a pretty big buff. And obviously the less HP you have, the more defense he has. So if you start a turn in a bit of a bad way after a super attack, his defense is going to be really, really good. So then we have the LR Turles Army, one of the best units in the game, ridiculously powerful even at 55%. The only downside, of course, is in harder events, like if you don't have many dupes, their defense is not great, but their defense is still pretty solid. They are a Terrifying Conquerors lead as well, so if you have them but you don't have the Cooler or the Bojack, you can use them as a leader and run a full Terrifying Conquerors team that is Space Traveling Warriors, and then just bring a Bojack friend, so the team can work that way as well. Obviously if you get 24 key, they have super effective against all types and the chance to perform an additional super attack. So these guys are just very, very powerful. They also support Terrifying Conquerors allies, which is really good. And of course, our boy AGL Turles can go very well alongside them, able to activate most of their links, give them a big attack buff. The only downside, of course, is that until he gets an easy A, AGL Turles is pretty soft defensively. He's providing that nice support for everybody, but especially if you go up against a tech phase a little bit later on, he is going to take a lot of damage, so you need to be careful where you place him on the rotation, maybe use an item. If he does transform, you lose access to the support buff, but he becomes a lot better defensively. He also recovers 15% HP at the start of the turn, which is a nice little bonus. But yeah, post-transformation, even without an item, his defense is going to be very solid. So that does kind of remove the one major downside of his untransformed state, although you are losing the support buff. So then we have LR Jiren, again, one of the most powerful LRs available, especially on Global, because we don't have any of the anniversary LRs yet. Nothing really too detailed to say about him. He's very much like Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, where he just has very, very high stats. He's going to do a crazy amount of damage. Even if you can't lower Goku's attack, you can usually lower defense, and as long as the enemy has one of those things, his attack's effective against all types. So he's going to be able to do a ton of damage. And then he does have an active skill. Once you've received 5 attacks, he gets attack and defense 30%, all enemies attack and defense minus 30, and stuns all the enemies, which is probably not going to be usable in this event, but just by getting the buff, it means he's going to be able to do an insane amount of damage on that turn. And of course, you can link him up with the God Topo, who post Easy A is still a good support unit, but is a lot better defensively. And he does share some great links with the LR Jiren, so that rotation is going to be very powerful. Then we have Bipan. Now obviously on JP she has her Easy A, but because of the way the event is time gated, I don't think anyone can actually have it active yet. So we did find out today that we are getting it on global, but it's going to be the same deal where you're not going to be able to get it for a little while. So you could run the risk of bringing her pre-Easy A. The only problem, of course, is her damage reduction is not guaranteed. So if you get further into the event, it could be very possible that actually she gets you killed in one of the later turns because her damage reduction doesn't activate. But as long as it does, she tanks reasonably well and she heals based on the damage she does, so she can be very useful for that. Plus, of course, her active skill is famous for, you know, you just pop that and your two main units on the rotation will then deal crazy damage. So she could be worth the risk, especially if you need to fill that final slot. But personally, if this event is going to be as hard as ESBR as it claims, I would probably wait until she has her Easy A to use her. Then we have the Prime Battle Frieza. So obviously he is very, very powerful after his Easy A. I guess as a last resort you could use him as a leader because he has Extreme Class 4 key and 90%. But that is a fairly low leader skill for what is going to be a difficult event. But he does greatly raise attack and defense on his 12 key super. So sometimes, just like a, you know, Spirit Bomb Absorb Goku and other units like that, it might be beneficial to deliberately go for his 12 key super so you can get that defense raise. But obviously on his 18 key super, he does an insane amount of damage. As long as you put him in the first or third slot, he gets a bunch of extra defense and extra key, so that can make it easier to get his 12 key super. He also gets an extra 50% attack when performing the Ultra Super, that's why he hits so hard when he does it. And then he gets an additional free key when attacking a super class enemy, which obviously we will be in this event. So if he's in slot 1 or slot 3, he gets 6 extra key. So getting his 18 key super isn't that difficult. If you want to deliberately get his 12 key super to get that greatly defense raise, you pretty much have to be trying to pick up like 1 or 2 orbs, especially if he's in slot 1 or 3. But he can definitely be very effective, especially if you are bringing units like the STR Cooler and you're running like the full double Bojack's lead. Them together on a rotation are absolutely ridiculous, especially with the Bojack support in slot 3. Then we have this Topo. I think he works better as a link partner for the LR Jiren because the God Topo, God Topo loses Hero of Justice, which is a 25% attack link. So technically this guy is a better link partner for the Jiren. He doesn't get his full passive unless there's a bunch of Universe 11 units on the team though, which is an issue. Although it's 3 or more, so it doesn't say 3 other. So as long as you have him, the LR Jiren, and the STR Topo, that would activate his passive actually. And he will guard if you have a Universe 11 ally in the same turn. So if you have him paired up with LR Jiren, obviously that's going to activate. So he can be a very good unit to run alongside LR Jiren as well. If you're not running Jiren, I wouldn't recommend bringing this guy at all. Maybe the God Topo would still be good, but definitely not this guy if you don't have LR Jiren. And then lastly, this Frieza. Definitely got to mention this Frieza, because we will be fighting a Goku family enemy in every single stage. He provides support to everybody and has 50% damage reduction and guards. So he's going to be super, super good defensively. As long as you have him and he fits under the lead that you're trying to bring, I would 100% bring this guy. You could run him on rotation with like Cooler, have Cooler in slot 2 and have Cooler be the main damage dealer. And he can just tank everything in slot 1. So Space Traveling Warriors is a very big category. There's a lot of other units that we could go over. Some of them we've mentioned in the other like categories as well. LR, Nappa and Vegeta not super great in like single target difficult events. Baby we've mentioned before as well. He's fairly solid, a little bit wonky because he doesn't have a perfect link partner. And then looking at some of the TURs, like a lot of these units are okay, but not like super great. Like the 16-bit Vegeta is decent, but in a super hard event, not so much. The AoE Frieza, again, in a single target difficult event, not so great. You know, Easy A Beerus, outdated. Raditz, not good against one single opponent. Vados, I guess, could be an okay support unit because she does have the built-in dodge, although I think it is confirmed now that Goku does disable dodge in the final fight again, just like the previous one. So there's no one else that like super jumps out at me from this list here, but let me know down below. I guess the physical Beerus, obviously he is a very powerful unit. He's not super great defensively if you don't have a lot of dupes, but the Whis is on here, so you could run the physical Beerus and STR Whis rotation, which is a very strong rotation. But yeah, let me know what your space traveling warriors build is going to look like down below in the comment section. So moving on to Giant Ape Power. So now for Global and JP, Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta has not returned. So if you did not pull him on his original banner, you're obviously not going to have the proper full category leader. But if you did summon on the most recent Dragon Ball Heroes banner at the end of last year, then you will potentially have the Super Saiyan 4 Broly or Super Saiyan 4 Gohan, who can be used as a sub-lead. Or there is the free-to-play Vegeta, although probably wouldn't recommend using him. But again, there are going to be ways to work around this, so let us go into the units here. So, Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, I don't feel like we really need to say much about this guy. I mean, when he first came out, he was pretty much hands down the best TUR in the game, and he's still very much in discussion for being in the top 5, regardless of how you order the top 5. He is a super good unit. For the first 8 turns, he's obviously going to be absolutely ridiculous. He's got that full extra attack and defense buff. Attacks effective against all types. He has a 50% chance to counter super attacks. And then once you get past those 8 turns, he still has a 50% chance of being attacks effective against all types. And then he does have the active skill. Once he's received 4 or more attacks, he gets attack and defense 40% and all enemies attack and defense minus 40%. So later on in the event, if you can't attack lower the Goku, the active skill is still good for giving Gogeta himself a big buff. But yeah, he obviously hands down is going to be an insane unit in this run, even with his passive slightly running out towards the end of the event, depending on how fast you get through. So then we have the Super Saiyan 4 Broly. Now he has a 130 lead for Giant Ape Power. You do need to have, I mean obviously for this mission this isn't going to matter, but you need to have another Giant Ape Power unit on rotation with him in order to get his passive to activate of having the additional attack that has a 50% chance of being a super attack. He can put out a ton of damage. Like if you have him with dupes, he can super attack 3 times in 1 turn, and he can do a ridiculous amount of damage. His defense isn't amazing, and remember he does need to attack first to actually get his defense, so you can't be putting him in slot 1. But he can put out a ton of damage. In the OG Legendary Goku event, he was pretty good. You just had to be very careful when you got to Int UI because of the type disadvantage. So I feel like it's going to be the same thing in this event, where if there's an Int stage, you're going to have to be careful. But otherwise, he definitely is going to be good for putting out the damage. You just definitely don't want to be putting him in front of a ton of attacks. Then we have the Super Saiyan 4 Gohan. He has a 120 lead, so he can obviously work alongside a Gogeta friend. He is going to be a really good tank on the team, because as long as you're running 4 or more Giant Ape Power allies, which obviously for this mission we're running a full team, he has 40% damage reduction on top of having the 140% defense. He has a chance to stun, which unfortunately is probably not going to be relevant in this run, but he does do immense damage on his super. So both him and the Bardock are super good cards, considering they're not even TURs yet. So this guy will be a really good tank on the team because of his passive being fully active, and of course you can use him as a sub lead if you don't have the Gogeta or the Broly. So then we have the free-to-play Vegeta. I thought I'd mention him briefly. The problem is his leader skill is only 3 key and 50%, so if you're bringing a Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta friend, your total leader skill is only 220, compared to like the 340 you're getting from double Gogetas. So he is I don't even know if I would use him as a last resort. I think I would try and build the team slightly differently, but obviously it depends what you have in your box. If he's the only Giant Ape Power leader that you have, then you basically have no choice but to bring him, and then you're probably just going to keep him floating off rotation, unless there's a whole bunch of attacks in slot 3, and then you'd need to fix up your rotations on the fly, because you want to put him in front of as few attacks as possible. So next up we of course have the LR Super Saiyan 4s. Kind of goes without saying that they're going to be very good here. They need a few turns to build up their full passive, but of course in these long form events the early stages aren't particularly difficult, so once they get fully built up they're obviously going to be very powerful. Once you get to turn 4 you have the ability to use their active skill, which I would always suggest saving until later on. Once you get to the last couple of stages, especially if you get to one where that particular unit has type advantage, so obviously if there's an STR phase that's a good time to pop Goku's, and then if there's a physical phase that's a good time to pop Vegeta's, so you can just get a whole bunch of free damage. Obviously they do need to super to raise their defense, and Vegeta does need to get his 18 key super to raise his defense, so you do need to be careful with the rotations, who you link them up with, and obviously making sure they get key. But they do get so much extra key from rainbow and same type orbs that as long as you're careful with the orbs and how you pick your orbs for like the person in slot 1 or 2, wherever you put these guys, it won't be too difficult. Especially for Goku, it's like almost impossible to not super with him because the 12 key super is fine. You just need to play smart with Vegeta so you can get his 18 key super. Then we have this kid Gohan. So I included him because one of the ways you can run this team if you don't have the Gogeta is you could run this guy as the leader because he's an all types 3 key and 120% to stats. As long as you have a Goku on the team, and it doesn't include Youth or the Ginyu Goku, but GT is not excluded here. So if you have Super Saiyan 4 Goku, if you have the new GT Goku, like they're going to activate his passive. So he does have pretty good defense and damage reduction. So he actually is going to be a unit that can work fairly well on the team as long as there is a Goku on rotation. If you want, you can always have him as a 3rd slot floater as long as both of the rotations have a Goku, because then when he floats into that 3rd spot his passive will be active and he can reduce the damage, so he'll be okay. He greatly raises attack and defense on his 12 key super as well, so I mean as long as you're 18 key, so as long as you're 18 key supering he's not going to take that much damage as long as there's a Goku. If there's not a Goku on rotation he will get absolutely murdered, so that is the only way you should use him, is if you can have him on rotation with a Goku all the time. But he can be a sub lead if you don't have the Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. Then we have the OG Super Saiyan 4s. Now bear in mind they don't have their Easy A yet, but they're going to get their Easy A fairly soon. So if this is a mission that you guys are having trouble beating straight away, maybe you don't have the LR Super Saiyan 4s if you're on Global, because obviously we don't have the same name update yet, or even if you're on JP where you do have the same name update but you don't have a bunch of the Heroes cards or anything like that, then maybe waiting for these guys to get their Easy A would be good. Because yeah, they are going to be very effective. We don't know what their Easy A does yet, but after Super Saiyan 3 Broly they seem to have fixed their ways with the 120 lead Easy A, so I can't imagine that they'll be bad. So for some people it might be worth waiting for them to get their Easy A. Then you saw briefly here when I accidentally clicked over to the tab, this AGL Wrathful Broly has aged fairly well. He still is pretty good. Once he's fully built up, he does have fairly solid defense. And of course, you know, he's on the category. He fits in if you're desperate for another unit to fit in and you don't have all of the heroes Super Saiyan 4s or anything like that. So he can work fairly well on the team, but again, he's more of a kind of slot filler if you don't have the ability to like fully stack the team with heroes units or anything like that. So then moving on, we have the GT Goku and the GT Vegeta. So these guys obviously brand new. If you pulled them from the new banner, I guess just because of the animation from their active skill, just like the LR Gohan from his 12 key super, they are on Giant 8 power even though they are not Super Saiyan 4s, so you can run them on the team. And then this Goku, if you did pull the new Goku, he is one of the best sub leads if you don't have Gogeta, because under a GT Heroes and Goku family team you can run a lot of the Super Saiyan 4s that we talked about. You can run under the Goku family part of the lead, you can run that Gohan, you can run like the Int Kid Goku, even though he's not necessarily the best unit, but you can run a full Giant 8 power team that's made up of GT Heroes and Goku family. So he's a really good sub leader. Vegeta not so much, because there's not as many like Vegeta family units that are on Great 8 power, but he can be run on the team as well. And obviously these two units are insanely good, so they are going to be very strong on the team. Then we have the Super Saiyan 4 Vegito. I don't know why I left him so far down the list, because he's really, really good. He's a support unit for Great 8 power as well as crossover, so if you are bringing some of the heroes units, they're going to get an extra buff from him. He raises defense on super, so after super attacking he can tank really well, and he has a 50% chance to super, and he has a great link set. So if you have him, there's no reason not to bring him. Even if you're just using him as a 3rd slot floating unit, he will be very good on the team. And if you are bringing like the full Heroes sort of Super Saiyan 4 build, the rotation of him with Super Saiyan 4 Broly is actually insanely powerful, because he gives Broly so much of a buff. And even though he does raise defense on Super, so he works better in slot 2 or 3, he can hold his own in slot 1, because his start of turn defense will be pretty decent. And of course, if a super attack gets launched in slot 1, he has a 50% chance to counter it. So he is very, very good. Then we have the Super Saiyan 4 Gohan. I've already talked about him. I don't know why I opened up his tab twice. Then we have Super Saiyan 4 Bardock. So Bardock only works if you're bringing a team that is made up of pretty much all of the Heroes Super Saiyan 4s, because you have to have 4 or more other crossover allies, not Giant 8 power. So that means you have to basically be running all of the Heroes Super Saiyan 4s and potentially even other crossover units, because you're not running double Super Saiyan 4 Vegetos for the crossover lead version of the Super Saiyan 4 team. So this guy might not fit in. You can still use him if you're not running the 4 or more crossover allies, but that extra 40% attack and defense is going to go a long way, especially the defense. But at the start of turn, if HP is 80% or more, he's attacks effective against all types, and if it's 90% or more, he gets a guaranteed crit. So he can be really, really strong as long as you can fit him into the team. And then as a last resort, I included this guy as a support unit, because he gives all allies attack 33%, but as I'm sure you guys know by this point, he's quite an old unit and his defense is not that great. So you got to be very careful where you put him in terms of attacks, because once you get to like the final stage, he will get absolutely destroyed. So I don't even know if I would necessarily bring him, but if you don't have any other option for your 6th Giant 8 power unit, at least he is providing support. So going back to the category, I mean, LR Super Baby 2 is a solid unit, but he doesn't really have a lot of good link partners on this team. The Team Bardock LR are a decent support for super types, but their defense isn't that great. So again, later on in the event, you could definitely start to take quite a lot of damage. And then really Giant 8 power, a lot of these other units like the Team Bardock Giant 8 units and like Giant 8 Turles, Vegeta and Raditz, none of them can really hold their own in difficult events, so I probably wouldn't consider any of them. And then Kumba, I mean, he's okay, but you can't get the utility from his stun, and like his defense is not great overall, especially as a Heroes unit that people are unlikely to have multiple copies of if you even have him at all. So let me know how you guys are going to run Giant 8 power. Like I said, there's a couple of ways you can do it with like a Goku family build or using the Kid Gohan, so let us know down below what your build is going to be for the Giant 8 power mission. Okay, so there you go. That is my team building guides for all of the missions for the new GT Legendary Goku event. Hopefully this helps you guys out. Like I said, for each of the sections, let us know what teams you're planning to run down below in the comments. And as I said at the beginning, for anybody who did watch the full video, I massively appreciate you guys. So smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And this has been your boy, The Masked Ningen. I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.